It has been described as one of the essentials of life. I'm talking about food. However, prices of foodstuffs and other commodities have hit the roof, whilst there are projections of some shortage on the market in the coming weeks. But has this exposed our reserve situation as a country? And what about our buffer stocks in these times? What are we doing to safeguard our food security as a country? Well, these are the things that we're looking at. And are we heading towards shortage in the country? And as a result of that, are we going to see price surges and things getting out of hand with respect to prices shooting up? And what about the Ghana Buffer Stock Company in terms of them needed at this time? Well, these are some of the issues that will be on the table on PM Express Business Edition. Are we heading towards some food shortage in the country as a result of developments in the market that we're experiencing? All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition. Right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at our food situation as a country. We joined via Zoom, that is the Deputy Minister of Agric, that is Mohammed Hadi Tafiru. He's the Deputy Minister of Agric. Also, Edward KAREWEH is with the General Agricultural Workers Union, representing the workers on the ground, and also an analyst, somebody who has been monitoring the developments on the ground with respect to the prices and all those things. That is Francis Danso, Content Manager at Isoko. So these are my guests tonight, all connecting via Zoom as you get some answers from government, some answers also from policymakers, and also answers from those who are analyzing the situation on the ground. Let's go on to our Zoom platform and connect to Edward KAREWEH. He is the General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union, and also Francis Danso. He is a Content Manager at Isoko, collecting data, monitoring developments on the market to get some understanding as in what is happening now. Why are we seeing prices hitting the roof and projections of shortage on the market? What about government? What about the Ghana Buffer Stock Company? What are they doing right now to deal with the situation? Let me go onto my Zoom platform and connect with Edward KAREWEH. He's the General Secretary of Cultural Workers Union, and Francis Danso. Thank you, gentlemen, for having time for us as we discuss this very, very important issue. Look, KAREWEH, so first, help me, Edward. I mean, you are with the Agric people, those on the ground, the farmers, and all those things. We've had issues about freight cost. We've had issues about production. Just help my viewers out. Why are we seeing spike in prices of foodstuffs on the market and threats of shortage?
Well, let me say good evening to my co-panelists there and yourself and those who are viewing us. And also, I'm grateful to share our views on the food situation, agricultural situation in our country. You know, we are where we are, very difficult situation because we have not been able to translate our good intentions in the form of policy to results. Policy intention is good. Policy programs are good. But the implementation of those programs have not led us to the desirable result. And sometimes we hear figures, and those figures, when you juxtapose them with what is on the ground, you see that there is a contradiction. So how can the ordinary Ghanaian make sense of the figures? And what do the figures mean to the consumer and any other ordinary person? It is only the price that will actually make sense. And when prices are going up, it is a reflection that policy intention has not been translated into reality. So this is where we are, and it is a worrying situation, as we all know.
Interesting submission there, but let me also bring in Francis Danso. I mean, Francis, you monitor the situation on the ground over the country and prices and all the rest. For you, some have described the situation as seasonal. Some also saying that no, I mean, things have gotten bad for people to now start complaining that, listen, we are struggling. Is it a normal situation we are in right now, or listen, it's seasonal?
Thank you, and good evening to your viewers. I believe that the situation is seasonal.
Wow.
But in terms of the quantum of the increases that we are seeing now, that is the difference. But in terms of we having spikes in food commodity prices, that is seasonal. If you go to 2019, around this same period, a bag of maize for Techiman was sold for less than 120 Ghana cedis. In 2020, it was less than 150. But currently, it is being sold at 300 Ghana cedis. So if you look at the difference, you see that it is really worrying. But in terms of its the spikes, it is seasonal that we see every year around the period.
You talk about being seasonal, but could we have avoided this? Because it appears it's become a cycle. But this time round, everyone is complaining.
Yes, it is something that we can avoid, but all players will have to come on board. We don't have to leave it to just one player within the value chain. All actors along the chain will have to come on board. If you remember last year when I spoke to you, I told you that in terms of how COVID will affect us, time will tell, because it is after our production cycle that will be put to test to see whether the things that we produced, we had enough. And indeed, we are being put to the test now, where now we are not producing. And so we are having to rely on the ones that we stored. And this is where the test is. And now that is where we are having issues with price.
Let me bring in Edward KAREWEH. I mean, General Agricultural Workers Union and the Agric workers. I mean, do you get frustrated? I mean, your job is to produce. And if you're producing and now you hear stories about shortage on the market, price hikes and all the rest, and it's become a cyclical, I mean something that happens perennial every time and all the rest. Do you get worried that policies are not addressing some of these concerns?
Well, the essence of policy is to address the seasonal differences. You know, we all know that naturally there is there's harvesting time, and there's lean season. Now, you don't allow things to take their own course. And that's why policy intervention is important. So all along we've been doing is to intervene with policies that will address the normal course of things. Now, if we still have spikes, and why it is very important this time is because why must this year be different from the previous years? It's because we have implemented this Planting for Food and Jobs program for 5 years. Year after year, we talk about successes, improvement upon the performance of the programs over the previous years. And again, if you take just 6 months ago, we were told if you take maize, we had produced more than 100% of the previous year's production. In fact, specifically, that we had 110% increase in maize production. Rice production, we had 48% increase over the previous year's production. Unless something dramatic happens and someone is able to come to explain to me and to many others there will not be need for us to be in this serious shortage of food in the system. So the cause for alarm is because, given the record 6 months ago, we should not suddenly be experiencing this drastic increase in the prices of the foodstuffs. And that is not what policy intervention is meant for. If indeed that was the objective of the policy intervention, is to create this type of spike, then of course we will say that we are achieving it. But the policy intervention is rather meant to correct it. But unfortunately, after 5 years of implementation of the Planting for Food and Jobs, we appear to be almost at the beginning of things when we started 5 years ago.
And then the Deputy Minister of Agric will be joining us very soon for us to put some answers to him in terms of what government is doing. But let me bring in Francis Danso as well. You have been monitoring the space and all the rest. Do you find this as quite surprising that just a few months ago, we are talking about exporting our excess of what we produced, and just a few months into the year, we are talking about shortage and all the rest? Is it more of the state of reserves, buffer stocks, or we just eat everything and then now we are going hungry?
So when you check literature and then you find out how we store our produce, I've always said that we have issues with post-harvest management.
Okay.
In your introduction, you mentioned buffer stock. Now we should ask ourselves, what is their capacity? Do we have in place measures that will allow them to come in and mop up the excesses when we harvest? And it is now that they are trying to put in place something to make sure that they can perform that role. But if you are not able to store and you produce, and within a short period, about half of it goes waste, it means that you are consuming just about half of what you produce. And so you'll be storing just about, so you have half, and then you'll be storing just half of the half that you have. And so in a situation like this, where we had difficulties last year, because last year there were rains destroying some farms, there was COVID and all that, then you are going to have issues with you being able to supply the market. So it is about how we handle the ones that we have. We cannot have bumper harvest throughout the year because we do not produce throughout the year. If you check our cycle, we just have about 6 months of production and making sure that we harvest, and then the other 6 months we will have to rely on the ones that we've stored. It is always at that point that we see that there are deficiencies in the way we that we have and the policies that we put in place.
But again, for you, does it expose our reserves, our buffer system and all the rest? Because it's become perennial that, listen, we had food, so much food. Let me also find out from you, how has COVID also played in all this? Because just last year or some few months ago, we looked at a situation where we're feeding ourselves. I mean, imports were not coming in. Now there's talk about freight cost pushing the prices of foodstuffs and some commodities on the market. What has changed all of a sudden?
Yes, I believe that some of our practices is giving way for up now. When people produce that they had, we in a way were sending whatever we had, some of them out, forgetting that we are not in normal times. And so once that these things begin to happen, traders are always rational, and then they want to cash in on everything that happens because they are in for the profit. And so once we begin to experience shortage at one point of the country, it spreads, and then they begin to also take advantage of the situation. So we are in this because one, the volumes that we had, we couldn't manage it very well, and so we almost have about half of it going waste. Let's ask ourselves, what happened to the produce that we produced last year? Where were they stored? How many of it have we consumed, and how many of them have gone waste? If you check the prices, you realize that for just about 3-4 months within the year, we have prices coming ridiculously low, that it becomes a disincentive for producers. But the moment we cross that barrier, you realize that then traders begin to cash in because we've not managed our production and our post-harvest very well. And so we always come back to the situation in which we are.
Let me see whether we can be able to connect with the Deputy Minister of Agric, Mohammed Nairu Tafiru. He's the Deputy Minister of Agric, and we're having some challenges connecting to him. But let me go back to Edward KAREWEH, who is the General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union. And Mr. KAREWEH, let's come to policies, because when there's a challenge with the system, policies is able to correct these challenges. Have we put in place the right policies to motivate the farmers out there to produce more, store more, reward these farmers, so that we don't have a situation where there's always a break in the cycle where we are struggling? And now look at what is happening. Prices hitting the roof. There's some kind of pockets of shortage on the market.
Well, I think one of the greatest mistakes to make is to judge policies by their intentions rather than their results. You know, we are looking at results. If we had put in policies and programs intended to address the post-harvest losses, as my colleague has indicated, if we had put in policies to ensure that production is increased, then all that will be measured or testified by the results that we have. Now, even, you know, so it makes us, the results should make us to go back and question whether is it the problem of the implementation of the policy? And all of us are aware that, look, we have just been informed by the ministry itself that much of the fertilizer that had been supplied to them had not been paid for. You know, if it had not been paid for, it means that this season we are not going to have much more fertilizer in the market. And the results are there already to show that there's no fertilizer in the market for farmers. So we should expect that the next season output will fall. Now, the question about COVID, you know, is now becoming easy way to blame everything on COVID. But you see, the COVID came in 2020, in March, April, when we had the lockdown. We raised concern, and really in the market, there was shortage of food. And how did we know that? It reflected in the market. But we were told that no, food was still cheap. You could get, for instance, plantain at the price of 4 cedis, 3 cedis, a bunch of plantain. We challenged that, but policymakers insisted. Now, come 20 December, when report was given about production, from March, when we had the severity of COVID, to December, production even increased more than 100%. So you see, it is very, very difficult for us to believe that really production was more than what? More than double, increased more than double. Because if that had happened, then someone should be able to tell us that, well, as a result of what? The post-harvest losses, the food that, the increment that we had from January to date, so much 50% or 60% or so much percentage of it has gone into post-harvest losses. We don't have those answers. So the rational thinking is to say that the figures did not actually match what was on the ground. Otherwise, there's no explanation for the shortage today. There's no explanation. It cannot be blamed on COVID because we said even in spite of COVID, we still produce more than we expected, more than doubled. So it's very difficult, but it is telling us that there's something wrong seriously with our figures that we churn out, because those figures must be near to what is happening on the ground. If they are not, then there's something wrong with that. And indeed, this is the situation today, that there's a serious disconnect, contradiction between what is on the ground and the figures that we churn out.
Are you challenging what the Agric Ministry put out and all the rest with respect to the food security situation and production, or what?
You know, well, the point is, if figures are put out, those type of figures are very difficult to verify for everybody, by everybody. If you take the consumers, the consumers' interest in Ghana is not necessarily about person. The interest is about the price of food. First and foremost, food must be available. The price must be affordable. Here we are, maize is not available. It's a stable food. It's not affordable. Anything that is linked to maize today, the price is going up. Poultry feed is very high because there's no maize, there's no sorghum, all those ingredients. Then it translates into poultry products. It translates into the poultry producers not being able to sell their products because they have to sell them at a high price. And then it translates into loss of jobs. It also translates into those producers who have taken money from the banks to finance their businesses. They cannot pay it. And then the banks get losses. Then the performance of bank also become poor. So it has a cyclical and then sectorial consequences and linkages, and it affects everything. So it's I'm constrained to accept that the figures were actually what they are, and then when the ground does not actually support that.
Francis Danso, I'm looking at policy here and having the right post-harvest structures in place to ensure that we can actually reserve or put away those things that we don't need. One critical policy that government championed and trumpeted was planting for food and jobs. Where did we go wrong? Or did we put all our eggs in one basket? And that is why we are experiencing this right now.
So when you check planting for food and jobs, you realize that the concentration was on production. And so farmers are being supported and all that to produce. Now, after production, what happens to the crops? Where do we keep them? How do we manage them? How do we even cut them from the various production centers to areas where they are needed? These are things that we need to look at. And these are things that when we take a value chain approach to solving the issues that we have currently in terms of pricing, we should look at. So that once we are enacting policies to address some of these things, we bring each and every stakeholder on board so that it doesn't become production bias, but we are looking at how best to serve each and every one there, so that when you produce, you don't have to produce and then they remain on the farm, because it becomes very difficult to move them from the farm to the centers where they are needed. And then when you even bring them, how do you keep them? We are producing plantain, we are producing cassava, we are producing maize, we are producing tomatoes and all that. How do we store tomatoes? When you go to the production areas for some of these things and you see them harvested, and then you go there in a week's time and you see the kind of losses that they've made, you ask yourself, how are these people able to produce year in, year out, season in, season out? We need to address some of these things. Can we look at bringing in technology, processing? Can we look at extending the shelf life of some of these things through processing and other means so that all year round we can have the produce available? Because when consumers know that within a certain period, let's say tomatoes, you can't get fresh tomatoes, but you can get tomatoes that have been semi-processed, then they will begin to adopt and then use that in the lean season so that we don't have to be going through this kind of cycle year in, year out.
We'll be trying to get back onto the line and connect to our Deputy Minister of Agric, and it'll be a good time for us to take a break as we discuss our food security situation in Ghana. Is it getting worse or getting out of hand? And what are the policy makers saying? What about those who are working on the ground and the analysts looking at the numbers? Are you worried that just some few months ago, we're talking about exporting producers so much they wanted to export the rest? Few months down the line, we're talking about shortage on the market. This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we assess the country's food situation as of now. And we are grateful to be joined on the telephone line by the Deputy Minister of Agric, Honorable YAW FRIMPONG. Honorable, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate so much. And there have been several reports on the market about food prices going up and all the rest. From government's perspective, what do you make of the current challenge on the market with respect to food prices going up and in terms of our food security situation?
Thank you so much. As you can imagine from my voice, I'm so tired. So pardon me.
Sorry, there is some disturbance in the background. Apologies for that one, please. Yeah, go ahead, Honorable.
That's okay. I'm saying that I'm very tired, but I'll oblige you and contribute to this program because the topic is very important. Yes, to the heart of the Minister of Food and Agriculture. Yes. Around this time, every year, prices go up. And it's been like that for, I don't know, since when. But it's not because between April, May, June, July, because of the planting season, both north and south in the country. So naturally, food becomes very scarce around this time of the year. But the good thing is that, in spite of the high prices, the costs are available, especially yam, which has the new yam has come, and because of that, yam prices are very good. But if you compare it with May, it's a big problem. It's a big problem because poultry farmers and those who have piggery, and these are competing for the limited products on the market. Because of that, prices have gone up. Today, for instance, I ate a certain size of kinky, and I screamed and said, "Wow, this size of kinky at 150 is too small." But it is to be expected at this time. It is our hope that once the new produce are beginning to be harvested, by end of September, October, prices will stabilize because we are going to have lots of food stuff on the market. And naturally, demand and supply, the presence of demand and supply will settle the price. So if you ask me about prices, yes, everybody in the ministry concedes that prices are quite high on the market. Yes.
Honorable, if I got you right, and just for some clarification, from the minister's projection and analysis, and the economists will always say, all other things being equal, you're hoping that by September, things should normalize.
Yes.
That is right.
That's exactly what I'm saying, yes. Because the new crops will be harvested between August and September. Lots of them will be harvested, especially the middle belt and the southern sector. The northern sector, they are now planting. And by it 3 months, they are ready to be harvested. So in the northern sector, we are looking at October, November, and they will also harvest. And that one will take us through next year up to the time of planting and up to the time of the next harvest. So it's a cyclical thing. It's just unfortunate that last year we had some bad weather in the south, the middle, and the southern belt. So it affected the outputs in these areas. But for the north, that had very good rain. We're going to face some serious crisis this year. But thank God that we escaped that calamity. So now what we are trying to do, although this year some rains failed at the time that we needed the most, the first to come. But since July, the rains have been good in even the middle and the southern sector. So we are hoping that the harvest will be good so that the prices will come down, because once supply outstrips demand or supply equals demand, we are going to have stable prices from October, November going. Yes, things are going to stabilize very much.
Honorable, in these times, and I stand to be educated since you are in this space, in times like this, every country will call upon its reserves and buffer stocks to help with the situation. What is happening to the Ghana Buffer Stock Company? Is it because you have not given them the instructions to release our reserves, or we don't even have any?
No, the little they have been releasing in such a manner that we are not going to create panic buying or those things. So, especially with the school feeding system. But for the buffer stock, we are going to be in crisis. So the little they have, they are managing it until new crop is bring us new tidings. Otherwise, if they were to release everything that we have onto the market, there's certainly going to be chaos in the next month. So the little they have, they are managing it.
Honorable, before I let you go, I mean, how do we get around this perennial challenge in fixing the challenge so that we don't get, because some are saying that yes, the harvest season will come in, things will improve to December, and then from January, February, we are back to this cycle again. What are you putting in place to minimize the situation? There are always blips on the market, but when things get out of hand, what are we doing to ensure that we don't get back to this challenge again?
Yeah, the government started putting up lots of warehouses around the country. As we speak right now, a lot of them, some have been completed and handed over, but a lot of them are in different stages of completion. So I'm very sure by the time of the major harvest this season, most of them will be ready so that we can store a lot of the grains, especially for next season. And you see, as more people roll onto the planting for food and just process, we are sure that a lot more acreages are going to be cultivated, and we are going to increase our yield, and therefore we will have a lot more food as reserve. And that is what we are looking at. A lot of people are talking about irrigation. And at the same time, as we speak, some irrigation projects are being rehabilitated. But there are a few. I mean, if you ask me, I wish we had enough funds available to go to full-scale irrigation in several parts of the country. But my brother, irrigation is very expensive to even construct and manage. So the thinkers behind the Planning for Food and Jobs felt that let us deal with the smallholder farmers, give them all the necessary inputs that they require to produce, and as more and more people roll onto the program, we are going to increase our yield. And what we will get from these smallholder farmers, because better agronomic practices and with permanent supply of inputs, we are going to have high yields on even small acreage that they cultivate. And that will make up for the shortfall in the irrigation situation that we have in this country. And ultimately, I think we would have to think about the irrigation as the last resort that can help us manage that perennial situation that you referred to. And I'm very confident that with the increase in funding for the Planning for Food and Jobs, and more young farmers rolling onto the Planning for Food and Jobs and all its possible, it will not be long for Ghana to become so much self-sufficient and exporting some. As we were doing to the 2018, we did a lot of that. But 2018, 2020, because of COVID, a lot of things changed, and it has affected even this year. So we are hoping that a lot more farmers will come on board, and then we get more of these people cultivating, so we can increase our yield. That will offset any shortfalls that will occur as a result of not using irrigation farming. Irrigation farming is very expensive. So we should manage the little resources that we have to feed ourselves. The motivation is that there is food security in the country. That is what we all should be aiming at. And gradually we are getting there. We've not had food crisis in this country since 1983, when there were serious bushfires across the length and breadth of the country. So we must continue with that so that we keep ourselves in that food security that we've enjoyed over the years. And I think if we increase our GDP to agriculture, then we can think about going into irrigation farming across board. But for now, the method that we are using, that's going to ensure that there will be food security in the country.
Honorable, before I let you go, my last question in a minute. I knew that there were monitoring reports. We heard that there were problems with paying the suppliers of the Planting for Food and Jobs program. Have you improved? Have you made some progress with respect to paying them right now?
Yeah, the payment to these suppliers is a kind of commitment that the ministry had with the suppliers. And the suppliers know that the ministry is doing its best, the Minister of Food and Agriculture, through dialoguing with the Minister of Finance, so that these suppliers pay. It's not that all of them are not being paid.
But you've made progress, Honorable, but you've made progress. So how soon would they be paid?
How soon? I cannot tell. I must be frank with you. How soon I cannot.
But you've made progress with the Ministry of Finance.
Exactly. Discussions are far advanced, and I know that it will not be long that these people will be settled. Then we move on, as we've been doing from 2017 to 2020.
Honorable, I thank you so much for your time. I appreciate so much. That's the Deputy Minister of Agric, Honorable YAW FRIMPONG. And Mr. KAREWEH, let me quickly get back to you. I wanted to finish with him and then get back to you guys on Zoom. Mr. KAREWEH, are you satisfied with what the ministry is saying? Or listen, there's still more to be done?
Well, the Honorable Minister was saying that hopefully in September things will improve. Much as this type hope must be backed by scientific, measures. We want to know whether the current policy framework will be structured in such a way that it will improve upon its delivery capacity as against what we have already seen. And then the other question, which I think probably he needs to come back, or the ministry needs to come back and clarify, is that if more and more farmers rolling on the program is a solution to addressing the food challenge in this country, then of course this year we should not have been having food shortage, because if we take the 2020 farmer population that have been put on the planning for food and job, that number is bigger than the previous one. So if by increasing the number is a solution, then this year should have been better. So based on what is on the ground, now if you are telling me that, oh, let's hope that in September things will be okay, without telling us concretely what policy changes you are making to ensure that what has been deviled us today will not come subsequently, other than hope, I have a problem with that.
But Mr. KAREWEH, just giving him the benefit of the doubt, just to come, you talked about just to give him the benefit of the doubt, you spoke about improvement in harvest and also irrigation situation and warehousing system and all the rest. So these are some of the things that he mentioned, if I got him right, in terms of what government is doing to still help with the situation. Maybe it's not enough.
We have not been told that the current shortage of food has been as a result of the inability of farmers to store the food. Okay. We have not been told that. If that has been the challenge, then we can address it. So I will know that, yes, more warehouses will lead to solving that. But that has not been clearly indicated to us that that has been the solution. And you see, now, whilst we are hoping that come September, food production will go up or output will go up, we are being told today that fertilizer supplies have been has suffered, progress, because the suppliers have not been paid. And as he's not able to tell us in concrete terms when the suppliers of fertilizer will be paid their money. So, and because the suppliers have not paid their money, the suppliers are also refusing to supply more fertilizer. And that is why today there's a shortage of fertilizer for the planting for food and jobs. So how putting all these things together, I mean, it will be hoping against hope to say that just come September, we'll have enough, and then when we have enough for the harvesting season, there will still be enough food into the lean season. We are not always, the September period is the harvesting season. So whether we produce enough or not, around harvesting season, prices normally come down.
Mr. KAREWEH, I think it will be a good time. I think it will be a good time. Let me just bring in Francis Danso quickly, and I'll get back to you. Mr. Danso, so for you, policy-wise, what the Deputy Minister has said, are you satisfied, or you think that, listen, there's still more that needs to be done in the short term to improve the situation?
I believe that in terms of planting for food, as you heard him say, it is still looking at production without the other aspects of the chain. So we produce, we are not able to cut it to the markets, even markets infrastructure and all that are things that, so it is still production based. We need to move from production to look at the other aspects that will affect the prices of the commodities. And yes, when we produce during the harvesting period, prices are going to come down. But what happens after that? Those are things that we need to start thinking about and then start finding solutions to.
But are you on the ground? September, he says that things will normalize?
Yes, if you look at it, from the second week in August, we expect that the market will signal that commodity prices will be coming down, because then they will start receiving the first batch of produce onto the market. But these are things that, as a country, we can't always rely on, because, yes, so the southern part will supply August, September, October. The northern part, November, and then October, November, and then some parts of December. What happens after that?
Oh, okay.
Do we go back to where we started?
Mr. Danso, so just in 30 seconds, your final words, your final thoughts. 30 seconds.
Yes, I believe that we need to start looking at how best to make sure that all year round prices are stable on the market.
Mr. KAREWEH, your final words in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'm also saying that in two phases, the planning for food and jobs strategy must be looked at again. Probably it has worked in the past, but it has reached its limit now. That strategy needs to be modified and modernized to account of the future. And then secondly, we should also be looking at how we are going to deal with the food crisis beyond the harvesting season. That is what I think we should be looking at too.
Mr. Edward KAREWEH, he's General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union. I appreciate your time so much. Francis Danso, Isoko, commodity trading firm, data collection and monitoring developments on the market, and also Honorable YAW FRIMPONG. He's the Deputy Minister of Agric. I know the debate will still be going on in your homes, as in what can be done best to ensure that food security or the food situation improves. The minister has said that we should look at September, things will normalize. My name is George Yafe. Have a great day.